you want to do art that also resonates with somebody else. So the fact that you get feedback, it's such a rare treat. So somebody actually takes the time and kind of like is then truthful to us to kind of like, great art, but I don't understand it. And I think then it's up to the artist kind of like to make their own mind as to, well, I keep it even though you don't like it. But I think quite often, of course, what's the point of art that, if nobody else then understands the art.
Hello, everyone. Today, I'm very excited. I'm here with Roope Rainisto, who is one of the most popular and successful AI artists today. Roope, you are calling from London. You are in an exhibition today, right? Or this week?
Yes, so I'm calling from my hotel room from the London. So we are preparing for the photo London exhibitions, which will be now done then with Verse. So we are presenting printed versions of the upcoming art collection, then Vacation here.
Right, Vacation in London. That's very exciting. I saw some of the previews, and yeah, it looks amazing. And I would like to talk about it, but first, I'm very curious about your background because it seems that you have done a lot of things. You used to work at Microsoft.
Mm.
You also work at the Varjo, which is a VR studio, right, out of Finland. So maybe can you tell us a bit about your background, Roope, before the last couple of years when you got into AI art? So how did you start your career?
Yeah, I think, I have like two halves of my professional kind of career. So for the first 25 years, I went to school then to study design. So I studied then UI design, UX design, psychology, the marketing. And then I did first 25 years as a professional designer. So designing smartphones, virtual reality devices, websites, doing then product design, UI design, UX design. And that was kind of like uh, I really then enjoyed that part of my life. But I guess it's true what they say that people have the kind of the midlife crisis, and I'm now then 44, so then roughly then 10 years ago, I guess I then had mine, and I was kind of thinking, well, I still have like 25 years of like the good time that I just spent. So I mean, what do I want to do? And I've always had the background in art, so I've always done arts as a pastime. So as I said, I've done like the photography for 30 years. I've played in a few bands. I've written songs. I've written screenplays. I've written this and that. I've made some films, but it's always been like the kind of the pastime. So I thought, well, you need to take some risks. So, so then 3 years ago, I then chose then to quit my job, and then I became a fifth then freelancer slash independent guy, and I wasn't sure, what would I then do, at the moment I then did that,
Mhm.
but I then knew that I then wanted then to do something new.
That's kind of very exciting. So you already had your career, and you were hit by the midlife crisis, as they call it, and you decided to go kind of independent and be a freelancer. But it was were you looking for commercial work, or you were planning from the beginning to kind of have an art career when you made this movement? Made this move.
Yeah, I didn't really know. So I mean, instantly when I became a freelancer, for the first 3 or 6 months, I did still my own work, old work. So I was a moonlight in 3 months as the product manager, and I did 12 weeks project as a kind of a then UI designer for a consultancy and so on. So I did still do that, but I guess after I did that for 6 months, I kind of felt like, well, why did I quit my job if I'm now still about then to do the same things that I then did before? So I kind of
Mm.
like started to think, well, I should really then start to do something else. And I thought, well, what is the most interesting thing that I see on the horizon? So I mean, what's my guess of what will change the world over the next 5 years? And my guess in 2021 was then AI. And I was thinking, well, I'd rather be the kind of last person that then they learns it, or I do choose to be then one of the first persons. So I thought, well, I'll try my best to combine everything I know. So everything I know from the tech side, everything from my pastimes, and everything new relating then to AI. So I've been now on this road for the past 3 years. So I'm in a then extremely fortunate position that I then spend my time then full time on trying to create something meaningful with AI tools.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So you were clear that AI, that was something you wanted to master early on. And when the blockchain and NFTs came in the picture, was it immediately? How did you define NFTs and
Well,
blockchain?
yeah, that then came a bit slower. So of course I was then starting to learn and to understand what's going on, and I found it quite fascinating. But I was a complete then rookie, so I had no understanding of what Bitcoin even is, or kind of like what's going on. So I slowly started then to, but I saw lots of interesting people making then interesting art. So that was the kind of the starting point. So I then started then to see, then to observe people and kind of like see what's then happening, and of course as I then started to create art myself, I then didn't create it originally then in thinking that I should start then to mint it or then to sell it. I think the actual interesting story of like how I started my profiles was kind of like how I started my profile then on then OpenSea and so on. That after the second time I got contacted by somebody who had then acquired then my art. So as I had no official personas, then there was fake then Roope Rainistos, since there wasn't then no Roope Rainisto on OpenSea, so somebody then pretended to be me. Then they then acquired, then they are right click saved my art, and then they started then to sell it the art. So after the second time it happened, I then thought, well, I need to start my own profiles, just to make it then harder for somebody else then to pretend to be me. And that's the actual kind of like fact of how I then started my own profiles, just because I wanted to prevent it. I
Mhm.
wanted to prevent people from pretending then to be me.
And where were you posting the images and your creations back then on Instagram?
Yeah, yeah. So somebody just then saved the kind of the low resolution pictures that I posted on my Instagram, and then started then to sell those. And
Mhm.
I didn't really even understand how these marketplaces work. So I there wasn't then then observing them, or I didn't search for myself. But
Yeah,
only when I got these kind of requests that, hey, I'm not sure that the art that I then bought is this really your art. So
yeah,
anyway, so that was a kind of fun excuse then to get started.
yeah,
But then of course as I started, then of course I then tried to kind of like try to sell the art for myself. And I think as with most artists, the first year was extremely quiet, or like first 18 months. I mean, I did all kinds of arts and I tried to sell it, and it was an extremely slow start. Most of that art is now then burned, but I think there's still some examples of like individual pieces that that were sold. But of course, I mean, as then as we all know, it then takes a long time, and you need to be then persistent in this space.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's encouraging for artists, right? Because hearing from you that early on it was slow, and I think the last year and a half, like maybe 2 years, you've been kind of on a roller coaster, right? It's been amazing. All these collections starting
Mm,
from life in West America, right?
mm,
I think that's the first one I saw from you. I know you as you said you were releasing
mm,
before that, but that drop with the BrainDrops, I
mm,
think that's when I started to see your name. I saw that collection and it was pretty impressive because it was very cohesive, right?
mm,
As a 500 pieces plus works on the first long form generative art collection that it kind of clicked, like it felt okay. This is all kind of following a storyline.
mm.
Can you tell us a bit about life in West America and how did that impact your your practice and maybe your life as well.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of like it. Then certainly then changed my life in multiple ways. So life in West America kind of like started from my then photography background. So I mean I I the first time I started to use these AI tools, I had this notion that I have the virtual camera at my disposal, so I can do things with this that I can now do with my camera, and that's kind of like my then initial then mindset when I started then to learn this. Of course, the first years the results really then weren't so then photographic or then photorealistic. But in 2022, then Stable Diffusion then came out, and it then really then didn't take much time before people figure out that you can do fine tuning and you can do all sorts of then tricks to make it then more than photographic. Um, I'm not saying that these are then photographs, but they are then pictures in a then photographic style. So I thought, well, um, life in West America is inspired by then my first inspiration is the Robert Frank. I wanted to recreate this kind of then road trip then across the states, and that was my first kind of then inspiration there. But I wanted to create something that would then be enjoyed by two groups of people. So something that is enjoyed by people who like AI art, but also enjoyed by people that like photography. So in theory, enjoyed by people who don't care about AI art then at all. So I mean, to create something that would kind of have this shared view that even though you don't care about how it's done, you might still then enjoy the art. But then at the same time, create something that can then only exist because of AI. And I think fundamentally you can think of AI that you can do two things with AI. You can either choose to use AI then to replicate something existing. So you can try to use AI to create something that resembles a photo, something that you can't tell, or where the kind of the purpose is that you can't tell is this AI or not. And I think that's fine. But I'm more interested in the kind of second thing that create something that is then exclusive to AI or is the new to AI or something that then wouldn't exist as such without AI. So to create like a new form or new forms of expression, and that's those are the two things I then basically try to combine. It's kind of like art that could be then loved by people that don't then care about AI, but at the same time art that needs AI then to exist.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. And I've been seeing Vacation,
Mm,
your current show, and I mean in the case of Vacation, it's I mean I have this line that I found from the description that these images often reference and critique American consumer culture, right? So that's Vacation, but also life in West America. You were interested in this kind of seeing this way of American culture and American life.
mm.
Um, so this inspiration in America and themes from America. Why are you interested in these topics, Robert? What
Yeah,
is the meaning of that?
yeah, it's kind of like that probably comes somewhat from my background as a Finn. So I mean, when I then grew up as a child, that was this kind of the mythical land far, far across the sea. So I mean, I only
Mm,
saw that from TV or the films. So I was in my mind, I was then able then to kind of like place my fantasies there. So I mean, that's the kind of the fantasy world. If I think
mhm,
about like this world, so I mean, where else? I mean, if it there wouldn't be the States, I mean, where else would I place this fantasy world? So it's not like in the kind of the UK or the Germany. That's the only place I can think of. I'm also inspired by art. I mean, like artists like then Lars von Trier, who made films about the States, and he's then not even been there.
mhm.
And I think it's a great then playground for all the fantasies I have of kind of like this place that really then doesn't exist as such. I
Hmm.
think vacation, especially, it's not only in the US. I think vacation, of course, plays. I think I chose this theme for vacation because I think vacations as a concept, people go on vacation then to escape from their personal reality. So that we all live somewhere in some roles in some places in our lives, and we go on vacation then to escape. So that we want to see something else. We want to alter our reality, and I thought that's the perfect theme for like an AI art kind of like. So I can use AI then to express the kind of the hazy nature of kind of like our fantasies of kind of like this kind of magical realities we can see when we go on vacation somewhere else, and where then we enjoy and have fun, and it's like this fantastic world. While
Hmm.
at the same time, the kind of the reality is that at least for me personally, when I go on vacation somewhere else, it's the same place, then everywhere. I can go halfway way around the world to some restaurant, but it then kind of reminds me of the restaurant then at home. So it has this kind of like feeling. At least for me personally, I have this feeling of when I when I am on vacations that that sometimes there's kind of like there no point, that it makes no difference the place that I'm in.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought that this kind of like escape from personal reality is the really a great theme for then to create AI art.
Hmm. Hmm. No, yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of a way for you to transport, right, to new, as you said, new worlds, new places. You still keep it very much like real, right? Because it's even if, as you said, you explore what AI can do that maybe other tools can't, and you see these imperfections, right, in your work. It's still humans, right? It's still like realistic, kind of realistic scenes. Um,
Yeah,
right? Do you explore also in vacation? Because I haven't seen the whole collection, but am I right that you explore like it's more like humans there, but maybe with the imperfections of AI, like multiple fingers, multiple heads, multiple bodies in one? Or do you try to kind of showcase non-human in your work as well, aliens or other kind of things?
I think the thing I learned from my life in West America is that people respond well, and this goes to photography overall. It's not about AI art only, but people respond to photographs or AI, synthetic photographs of people. There's just something fundamentally in us that we they really love photographs of people and so on. The work tries to play with this notion. So yes, as mentioned, I'm here in photo London, and we just had a we, we just showed the work the first kind of set of people, and I think they all said the same. So they came in, and then we told them later on that this is actually a 100% AI, and people were kind of like, oh, it's really. I want to play with this. That your first impression hopefully is that it then looks real, it looks realistic, it looks photographic, but that there's like sufficiently things in the word that when you go deeper and you start then to inspect, then you're then forced then to reinterpret. I do that in the hopes that then creates tension in the art. So you have this kind of like two forces that fight. So if the artwork is like then too much realistic, or it's too much then fantasy, then it then really then doesn't have this tension. But my goal there is to create artworks that if you see like small parts of it, you might only see that part and you might think that it's real. But then as you go back and you see the big picture, you of course then understand that it's not real.
Mm.
And in some way, I think it's more interesting to talk about reality by presenting things that are not real, because that then forces in your mind to kind of like question or then try to answer, why isn't this real? I mean, what's wrong? And then every time you answer those, then you're forced to think much more than deeply as to well, why isn't this real, or what does real mean, versus just presenting something that looks real. I think then you don't have the same discussion. So that's at least then my hope then behind this art.
How is the process to put in the case of vacation? when did you start to work on this, and when did you had this kind of, okay, this is a collection, and you had the idea it will be called Vacation? Is this something you already had in mind before starting, or is something that comes along the way as you play with the tools, you see the outputs? How is that for you?
Well, I think that's an interesting question because I think I create constantly. So I just went back a few weeks ago to my final pictures, and I saw that the first piece that is now in vacation I created then in last November, and the last piece was created in April. So that's then 6 months of the actual creation process. But I think I probably spent the whole last then autumn time then exploring and thinking. So I mean, the actual creation time is 6 months, and the actual then incubation time is kind of like 9 months total. So I think I certainly then didn't have this team ready instantly, but I think I through constant then experimentation and then exploration, I kind of like figured out that I want to do it exactly of then this team, and that then took a long time. But yeah, I mean, it certainly then wasn't ready. I also calculated that in the 6 months, I created roughly 100,000 pictures,
Wow.
and then now there's the final 500. I mean, 100,000 of course sounds a lot, but if you split that to 880 days, it's like 600 per day, which is still a lot, but it's kind of like more than understandable. So I think then to create something like that, I just need a lot of time because I mean nobody, your mind just then gets exhausted
Yeah.
if you see 1,000 artworks per day, you simply can't start to think about them in a rational way.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, if you do that for 5 days in a row,
Mm.
maybe you kind of lost track of what you were doing maybe in the first day, right? If you do that
Yeah.
for 3 weeks. So that takes me to another question, which is related to curation.
Mm.
So how do you actually curate the final 500 pieces? What are you looking for?
Mm.
And how do you separate? Do you have like folders? How do you organize this kind of stuff? Is it a software specific tool that you use, or just simply folders?
Good question. So I mean, the main tool I use is then Photoshop, then Lightroom. So Lightroom is of course photography. It's not perfect, but I mean it is then extremely good for both then trying to organize and then to make small changes. So it's easy then to make some, adjustments in the picture. So I use Lightroom, but I think the way I work is that I create art on my own computer. So I have then three high-end then computers at home where I run custom versions, custom fine-tuned versions of then Stable Diffusion and so on. And I usually then leave them then to run then overnight. So I mean, I think I put my computers to run, and then I wake up the next kind of the morning, and then I have a thousand pictures then to pick from, and then the first step is just then to go through them. And of course, if you think about them, it is just this first impression. So kind of like art is you can't think about it in a kind of like logical way. I mean, I go through them and I pick the ones that make me feel something, and they then go to the next round. And kind of like usually it's like in the first stage, 95% of pictures don't reach the next stage. So if
Mm,
I create 1,000, probably I have the 50 then in my Lightroom, and then kind of like then it then goes on from there. But you're right that it's 500 is a tough number because you simply it's such an overwhelming number in terms of like creating artwork that is distinct from each other, and just trying to even remember what you have there and kind of like remember that does this remind you of something else, and kind of like can you express this in a different way, and kind of like it is such an exhausting kind of exercise that each time I do it, I swear to myself that this will be the last time that I then do this at all, because it's
yeah.
such a painful exercise. But then I have to set. I know that I want to do 500, and then I sometimes either reach this number, so I have 500 items picked, and then I just create more and more, and then each time I add something, I then need to remove something from the set then to maintain the 5,000. And then when I reach the stage that I can't find a single one that I want to remove, then I know
Mhm.
that it's done. And that's a kind of like interesting way that I know. So I now have the final 500 set, and I have a folder that was called ones that were then one day in. So now I have 2,500 pictures, you know, that were at one stage they were invitations. So that kind of means that each picture has been then replaced 5 times by something
Mhm.
that I then enjoy more. And I've now finally reached the stage that I'm there very happy with my 500, and I can't find a single one that I then want to replace. But yeah, it is a quite painstaking process.
It feels like most of the time is actually curating the work, right? And trying to uh, select those pieces that, as you said, inspire something or make you feel something.
Yeah.
And you also had a show with Fellowship, if I remember correctly. You were curating that show, right? It was with a group of artists. So, how is the process curating other artists or seeing the work from others? Is it similar to what you just described when creating your own art and selecting your own work?
Well, it's same and different. So I mean, there's some aspects to it. Yes. So you're referring to fellowships. With fellowship we did post photographic perspective number one, so the show. So I was there as a kind of one of the main kind of curators, and I also had my reworld show there at the same time, but I also served as the kind of the curator there. uh, Curators, of course, it's case by case, so each then artist has their own desires and needs and kind of like ways of uh, then working with. So with some of the artists in post photographic perspective ones, I did all the curation, and for some I did some of the curation, and some I did gave more suggestions, and for some it was more like a discussion. So it's really, I think curation done by somebody else is also very interesting in some way, that sometimes the artists themselves are blind to what's their best work. So I mean, it this is not just for like photos or AI art, but then overall, I mean, there's always like a music, somebody then writes songs, and it's the song that they don't think it's great, but then when somebody else hears it, then they say, well, this one is the hit, and so on. So I mean, it's this overall question, and I think many artists would then greatly then take advantage of the fact that when somebody else sees it, they have a fresh pair of eyes, or they can see something that the artist perhaps then really then doesn't appreciate. So in some way, when you do self kind of curation, it's harder because you don't, of course, know if your feelings are the same as as what the somebody else feels. But yeah, I mean, I think overall as a space, doing extensive then kind of curation, self curation, or then for somebody else, that really has potential then to improve the end results a lot.
What you just said, that sometimes the artist is kind of blind and cannot spot their hits. Do you usually work with friends or family, or in the case of galleries, do you ask their opinions? So in the case of Verse or Fellowship, Bright Moments, which is another one you participated on, do you usually work together with them also to get feedback? How is that, or you prefer to do it alone? How is that for you?
No, I mean, I usually, so for instance with vacation, the latest ones, I we went through almost like 1 month, 2 months of like the back and forth with me and the verse team. Plus, I also showed it them privately to a few then trusted people, just to get their feedback as to which pieces most runners then resonated with them, and which pieces they didn't understand. So in case of vacation and verse, I think versus input, probably I'd switched like almost 100 pieces out of the 500, then got changed by versus feedback as to kind of like they didn't feel that it didn't fit the team, or it kind of like it wasn't a complete, it was hard to interpret and so on. So I think that's why you do art. So, I mean, you want to do art that also then resonates with somebody else. So the fact that you get feedback, it's such a rare treat. So somebody actually takes the time and kind of like is then truthful to us to kind of like, great art, but I don't understand it. And I think then it's up to the artist kind of like to make their own mind as to, well, I keep it even though you don't like it. But I think quite often, of course, what's the point of art that, if then nobody else then understands the art? It's certainly then an improvement usually then to hear this feedback.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think these galleries, right, like Verse,
Mm,
they have such a good team of curators, right, and
mm,
they also have seen a lot of work, so their input is definitely something that I think it's I mean improves the work in general.
mm,
So that makes a lot of sense. And we did a good recap of kind of your collections and your beginnings in the space and your background, your career. But there is something else that you have been playing with, and I've seen your YouTube
mm,
channels, for
mm,
example, where you have been doing these sort of films, AI
mm,
films, these sort of short stories. And as somebody that have been like heads down playing with different tools, how do you feel about AI films, like complete movies? How far are we from that, Robert? Do you
mm.
think it's a few years away where movies like popular hits, top movies, blockbusters are made with fully AI and models? Is that something you think is close, or you still feel like far away, or will never happen? What are your thoughts there after experimenting?
The route for best success in the intermediate term is to do this hybrid approach. So kind of like rather than thinking that you want to create something that is 100% AI, you actually create something where you kind of like do a mixture of like you film real actors and real scenes by yourself, then to some extent, and then you use AI then to enhance or extend or kind of like then to transform these performances or to make them look more like film and so on. So I think I see huge potential there. So I think if you think about film today, it's such an expensive and slow and painstaking process of things to do. It's such a rare thing. So, I mean, such a rare chance for somebody then to actually then to make a film. And I think this rarity as AI tools then kind of start to develop, it will soon become possible for an individual creator or a small team, more realistically, a small team with a small budget to actually make something that resembles something that used to take a lot more time and a lot larger budget. So it then gives much more opportunities for people then to tell stories. But I think the same way as with AI, the fact that you can use something like Midjourney to create like a nice picture, that then is then not enough. I mean, even though the AI tools will soon maturize in a way that you can create like a nice a movie where then something happens, the same issues of kind of like film storytelling, that you actually need to tell meaningful stories, and that's not a technical exercise. I mean, you can give a skilled storyteller then an iPhone, or you can give them the cheapest stuff that you find, and they can still make a great movie, and then vice versa. So you can give a bad filmmaker the most expensive cameras, and they still can't make a then good movie. So even though AI will maturize in a way that these tools of actually creating the pieces of films will get much more than accessible. Well, of course, who knows what then happens with something like the chat GPT in the future.
Mm,
I mean,
yeah.
they might be able to actually solve the problem of like you actually tell then great stories. I don't want to say it's not possible in the future. Then it's not yet possible today with then chat GPT. But overall, I'm like then super positive as to the kind of the opportunities that will come to then the creators in the near future of actually, if you've then ever had a dream of like, hey, I wish I could made a film, that these dreams become much more real soon.
I agree that there are some skills which are more on the creative side, and the storytelling and the scripts and the main ideas
Mm,
that still need to be developed by somebody, right? Maybe AI can support and assist, but it needs to be right the person or a group of people that come together and have some sort of radical idea, right? That's still needed, even if you have the best technology, as you said. And in terms of the technology, Rope, for people that are interested in maybe starting
Mm.
in this space, creating AI art, what are some of your favorite tools? What would you recommend people maybe to get started in the once they are more advanced? What are some tools that you or maybe there is only a couple of tools? So what are your favorite tools these days in the AI space? You mentioned already Photoshop
Mm.
and Stable Diffusion, but maybe there are more.
Yeah, so I think if you're interested, then to learn, then to start. The tool I've been recommending for a long time, and I'm still recommending, is the Midjourney. So Midjourney is a commercial service that you can use on your phone or tablet. You don't need to install then anything. It works on all your computers. It's then super easy then to get in there. You can go to their Discord. You can prompt, and you get nice results back instantly. The Discord is the best way to learn because you see the prompts of the people that they use it. So rather than reading about what kind of prompts to use,
Mm,
that's the most and easiest way to learn is that you go there and see prompt, you see results, you see what the other people are using. You can then steal their prompts and kind of like do something else and then to try out. So that is the absolutely fastest way then to learn prompting. I think then after one day many artists probably then reach their limits with Midjourney. So Midjourney's strength is that it's the very easy to make nice looking pictures, even though you write something quite simple. That's also the kind of the flip side. So it kind of like to be successful in art, you need then three things ultimately. I I I then heard this from them somewhere, but I think it's a really good thought. You need art that is first of all the distinctive. You need to put in the effort and to let people know about the art. And the third one is that the art should be good. Well,
mm,
let's ignore points number 2 and 3. So you need to put it in the word, and art needs to be good. The first point is the art needs to be distinctive. So ideally, you create art where you can recognize the artist. So kind
mhm,
of like after a while, you reach the stage that you are able to create something that even then when you post it then online, people should have a feeling that it's then your art, even though they don't see the title. And I think
mhm,
therein, once you reach that stage that you want to reach this point, in that moment, then you might start to think that you want to use something else like the Mid Journey's tools like Midjourney, and I think all the closed source tools have this kind of issue that it's hard to do something distinctive.
mhm.
So you can create really the beautiful art with it, but then when it's posted online, it's hard for somebody else to know. Is this your art or then somebody else? It's not impossible, but it's hard.
And then after Mid Journey, what will be some tools that let people be more distinctive? Is that you have to get more technical and have like a setup more advanced setup, or how would you accomplish that? Because I think you also use a lot of your own input, right? Your own images. You mentioned synthetic data, synthetic photographs. Is that a more complex setup, and they need to master different sort of models, data models, different tools, or how what would be an approach to do that?
Yeah, I mean, then at some stage, you reach a point where you can when you where you start to want to customize the tools itself. And there's a number of also online tools that every service called like then it can be like then something like then Leonardo, or there's a number of these services which then permits you to actually train it in some way. So you don't so that you can input additional then training data, create customer like trained versions, and then start to apply them. I said earlier, I use then Stable Diffusion myself because you can then install it on your home computer. I'm in a fortunate position that I have my home computer, so then I they run it for free. I said I don't create then 1,000 pictures then overnight, and I don't think about how much does it cost.
Mm,
So then when you reach a world that you can create as much as you want, that's good for like the kind of the creative purposes. But of course, it then kind of depends on what you need. Uh, there is certainly a number of options, and I think what I'm saying, of course, then doesn't apply to all art. So I think it's kind of like I have a quite specific way on. I actually do this stable diffusion trainings also in some way that I don't want to make it more perfect when I train. I actually train it sometimes then to be less perfect, and I
mm,
think I actually do the things in training that you're kind of not supposed to do in a way to kind of like there's certain rules of how do you do these trainings and then fine tunings, and I purposefully don't then use all of these rules because I want to actually make it less perfect,
mhm.
and I think the kind of the deeper you go there, the more you start to learn about. It's good to know the rules and then to not to use the rules if you want to create something distinctive.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think um, many listeners will really this will help them a lot to get started, and maybe other artists find some inspiration there to kind of improve their process or try new things. So thanks so much for sharing, Rope. And just to close this conversation, which has been fantastic. I have a question that I like to ask all guests, and it's to name three artists that inspire you and why. Could be digital artists, could be AI artists, three artists that inspire Rope in his practice.
I've repeated this sometimes earlier, but I mean it's true. So I'm trying to say. So I mean, first artist that inspired me. I remember I was like 12 years or 13 years old when I started to read his books. Is then Franz Kafka. So of course, Franz Kafka is kind of like the first author that I read where I actually kind of figured out that you don't have to deal with reality as such, but you can actually start to write. If you have this own particular view of reality, you can really go deeper, and you can start then to express that one. I'm like super inspired by his writings. Second one, famous film director, the Mr. The David Lynch. Of course,
Mm,
many people are are his fans. There's even this people call art the Lynchian, and I think that's of course a high praise. But I'm very inspired by the same reasons that you can create art that is kind of like seemingly seemingly realistic and kind of like, but at the same time it's kind of like very then dreamlike or kind of like it has its own kind of like there's an tension and like the mystery
mhm,
within there. So it then leaves room for the viewer then to interpret it in its own way. Lynch is then very famous in not he then then doesn't want to explain his own works because he believes that it's important to leave space for the kind of the audience then to make their own then to make up their own mind. Third one, let's pick something else. So let's say like music. If I go back to my childhood, the first band that I remember I recorded on my C cassettes is
mhm.
was then Queen. So I'm a
Queen.
Queen is kind of like Queen is of course very well. I mean, perhaps the thing you can say about Queen is that Queen is then distinctively Queen. So that
Mm,
it's a band that found its own personality and kind of like was then not afraid then to sound like Queen, or was then not afraid then to go as far as they went. And I
yeah,
think that's that's then inspiring to me as an artist to kind of like don't be afraid to be as Queen as you are, kind of, or
yeah.
don't be afraid then to be distinctive. And I think people then appreciate Queen is also very then authentic. I think many in this postmodern reality, nobody wants, everyone is a bit then plays things as a joke. And I think art, you then shouldn't play art as a joke. You need to do your best, and you actually try to need to be then authentic. And I think these three are artists, then inspire me in that.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic list, and the reasons is fantastic. Queen is a great example. They are their technical ability,
Mm.
but also they were very conceptual, right? And they
Yeah.
have very strong ideas and radical. They weren't afraid to try new things back in those days. So yeah, that's a great list. Rope, thanks so much for your time. I hope you have a great time in London, and I'll be waiting to see the collection, the vacation
Mm.
collection. And thanks again. It was a pleasure meeting you, and hope to see you soon in the future.
Yes, likewise. So thank you for the kind of the opportunity then to have me there. And a final plug. So go to Verse to see the majority of the vacation. So if you want then to see the works, great.
Yes, and the show notes will have a link to vacation
Yeah,
and all your collections for anybody listening that wants to jump into your art. Thanks
great,
so much, Robert. Have a great day.
great. Thank you.